Dear learners, I welcome you back to another video lecture of the massive open online course on gender and the media. This is the week number 9 of the course and we are going to discuss the unit number 30 of module 9. This unit has been titled Gender and Online Activism. Here we shall try to have a discussion on intersection of gender and online activism in contemporary digital environments. We'll try to analyze how gender shapes and is shaped by digital activist practices. The proliferation of digital technologies and online platforms has transformed the landscape of social activism. You might be familiar with the movements such as Arab Spring, Black Lives Matter, the Me Too campaign, climate justice campaigns, etc. Digital tools have become central to how social movements organize, communicate, and mobilize. Within this context, gender has emerged as both a significant axis around which activism occurs and a critical lens through which we understand the dynamics of digital engagement. In this unit, we shall examine the multifaceted relationship between gender and online activism. We will explore how digital spaces simultaneously offer new possibilities for gender justice work while reproducing and sometimes amplifying the existing inequalities. So, how do gendered power dynamics manifest in digital activist spaces? In what ways do online platforms enable or constrain gender-based organizing? How do intersectional identities shape experiences of digital activism? And what strategies have proved effective for leveraging digital tools in service of gender justice? Everything begins with the increasing use of digital platforms for contemporary activism and public discourse. As social movements increasingly operate through hybrid online-offline strategies, it is crucial to understand the gendered dimension of digital engagement. Moreover, as platform governance, digital surveillance, and online harassment present evolving challenges to activist work, critical analysis of the relationship between technology and social change grows more urgent. What is digital activism? The study of online activism has evolved considerably since early research on internet-based social movements in the 1990s. Early scholarship often reflected either on techno-utopian perspectives that celebrated the democratizing potential of digital media or the techno-pessimist views that emphasized digital divides and the limitations of clicktivism. Contemporary approaches typically adopt more nuanced positions that recognize both the affordances and the constraints of digital platforms for activist work. Here, Earl and Kimport in 2011, they defined digital activism as the use of digital tools in contentious politics, emphasizing how technologies can reduce the costs of participation, enable new forms of organizing, and alter traditional dynamics of collective action. Another researchers extend this definition by highlighting the increasingly hybrid nature of contemporary activism, which blends online and offline tactics in complex ways. They argue that digital technologies should be understood not simply as tools, but as environments that shape how activism is conceptualized and practiced. Critical perspectives on digital activism have highlighted concerns about surveillance, platform capitalism, algorithmic governance, etc., and also the commodification of these social movements. So these critics, they emphasize that digital platforms are not neutral spaces, but commercially owned infrastructures which are designed primarily to generate profit rather than to facilitate social change. Now let us talk about gender and technology. Feminist technology studies have long examined the mutually constitutive relationship between gender and technology. Westman's feminist approach argues that technology is neither inherently patriarchal nor automatically liberating for women. Rather, the gendered implications of any technology depend on specific socio-political contexts and how technologies are deployed. So this perspective builds on earlier work by feminist scholars like Haraway, whose concept of the cyborg challenged essentialist gender categories and suggested possibilities for technologically mediated feminist politics. So research on gender and digital divides have moved beyond simple binary considerations of access to examine more complex disparities in digital literacy, participation, and benefits. So studies of online harassment and technology-facilitated gender-based violence have documented how digital platforms can amplify misogyny and serve as tools for harassment and abuse. Gender-based social movements. Gender has been central to numerous social movements throughout history, from women's suffrage campaigns to the gay liberation to contemporary transgender rights activism. This concept of gender consciousness, suggested by Taylor, it helps to explain how shared experiences of gender-based oppression can catalyze collective identity formation and political mobilization. Feminist movement scholarship has examined the cyclical nature of gender-based activism, tensions between institutional and grassroots organizing, and the complex relationship between feminist movements and other progressive coalitions. Contemporary gender-based movements increasingly operate through intersectional frameworks that recognizes how gender operation interacts with other systems of inequality. The theory of metrics of domination similarly emphasizes how race, class, gender, and sexuality constitute interlocking systems of operation, and these must be addressed simultaneously. Now let us have a little bit of talk about networked feminism, which was articulated by Baer and Keller. It examines how digital networks enable new forms of feminist connection, discourse, and organizing while recognizing the structural constraints and power dynamics that shape these networks. So this approach builds on Manuel Castell's work on networked social movements while centering gender as a key analytical category. Platform studies provides tools for analyzing how the technical architecture, economic models, and governance structures of digital platforms shape user behavior and activist possibilities. This perspective highlights how platform affordances, the feature that enable or constrain creation aspects, how it influences what forms of activism become possible or prominent. Then intersectionality, it serves as both an analytical framework and normative commitment throughout understanding this particular aspect of study. It informs us how we understand the differences in digital participation, activist priorities, and movement outcomes. So this approach recognizes that gender-based oppression cannot be separated from other systems of inequality and that effective activism must address these interlocking dynamics. So here we shall try to briefly examine the Me Too campaign, the transgender right activisms on platforms like TikTok and Twitter, the feminist movements in the global south, then digital organizing around gender-based violence in conflict zones. So before examining specific activist campaigns, it is essential to understand how gender shapes basic participation in digital spaces. So access and digital divides. This is a very prominent aspect or a concept that we come across every day. Despite significant progress in closing gender gaps in internet access, substantial disparities can be seen and persists globally. These disparities reflect broader structural inequalities which include gender gaps in education, income, leisure time, and technology skills. Access disparities are particularly pronounced at intersections with other forms of marginalization. Rural women, older women, women with lower incomes, and women with disabilities, they face compounded barriers to digital participation. In many contexts, cultural norms and family control also restrict women's internet use. World Wide Web Foundation research, World Wide Web Foundation research found that in some regions, women must request permission from male family members to go online or are prohibited from using social media platforms. Even when basic access exists, device inequalities impact participation. Women are less likely than men to own smartphones and more likely to share devices with the family members. So it limits their privacy and autonomy online. The COVID-19 pandemic has both highlighted and exaggerated these divides as education, work, and social connections increasingly moved online. Platform demographics and gendered user patterns. Different social platforms exhibit distinct gender patterns in user demographics and behavior. The data indicate that Pinterest and Instagram users skew female, while Reddit and Twitter have historically had more male users, though these patterns vary region-wise and these are gradually evolving. So these demographic differences, they influence which platforms become central to different types of gender-based activism. So platform design decisions have often reflected and reinforced gender norms. For instance, early social media platforms privileged public confrontational discourse models that align with traditionally masculine communication styles, while platforms focused on visual content and personal sharing, they gained more reputations as more feminine spaces. So these gendered association influence which platforms activists select for different campaigns and how the messages are crafted for specific platform contexts. Now, online harassment and safety. So one of the most significant gendered dimensions of digital participation concerns safety and harassment. Research consistently shows that women, particularly women of color, LGBTQ plus individuals and public figures, they experience disproportionate levels of online abuse. Tweets are sent to female politicians and journalists, and they're finding colored women were 84% more likely than white women to receive abusive tweets. This harassment takes multiple forms, including sexualized threats, publishing private information, image-based abuse, impersonation, and coordinated attacks. For activists addressing gender issues, this abuse often becomes more severe as their visibility makes them targets for backlash. The gendered nature of this harassment is evident in its content, which frequently involves sexualized threats, appearance-based criticism, and attacks questioning women's competence or credibility. Now let us have a look at the Me Too campaign, which gained a lot of visibility worldwide. The Me Too movement, it represents one of the most significant examples of gender-focused hashtag activism. While the phrase Me Too was originally coined by activist Tarana Burke in 2006 as part of her work with sexual assault survivors, this particular hashtag, it gained unprecedented visibility in October 2017 when actor Alyssa Milano encouraged women to share their experiences of sexual harassment and assault on Twitter. Within 24 hours, the hashtag was used more than 12 million times across platforms. So the movement's digital architecture enabled several key functions: visibility, making previously hidden experiences public; aggregation, connecting individual stories with a recognizable pattern; solidarity, creating spaces for mutual support; and accountability, applying public pressure on institutions. So this hashtag format proved particularly effective for sexual violence advocacy, and it allowed participants to contribute at their chosen level of disclosure. They were free to simply posting hashtag Me Too, and others were also sharing detailed personal accounts. So there was the freedom to contribute their own level of disclosure. So what began as a primarily American phenomenon, it quickly spread globally with significant adaptations to local contexts. In France, hashtag Balance Ton Porsche, that means, I don't know if I have pronounced it correctly, it basically refers to expose your pig. It emphasized naming perpetrators. In China, censors blocked Me Too, leading activists to use the homophonous hashtag Rice Bunny to evade detection. In India, hashtag Me Too sparked a reckoning in Bollywood, journalism and politics that faced both support and significant backlash. So these adaptations demonstrate how digital movements are transformed through processes of cultural translation. Critical analysis of Me Too campaign have highlighted both its accomplishments and limitations. The movement successfully shifted public discourse around sexual violence, and it led to the removal of numerous powerful abusers, and it spurred policy changes in various industries. The Me Too case illustrates the complex dynamics of contemporary feminist digital activism, its ability to rapidly mobilize global attention, its vulnerability to co-optation and selective amplification, and the challenges of translating viral moments into sustained institutional change. Now let us talk about the transgender rights activism. Digital platforms have been crucial sites for transgender rights activism, particularly given mainstream media's historically poor coverage of transgender issues. Social media has enabled transgender individuals to share their experiences directly by challenging misrepresentation and build communities outside traditional gatekeeping structures. So YouTube has emerged as a particularly important platform for transgender visibility. Creators like ContraPoints, Jamie Dodger, and Cat Black have developed substantial followings by producing educational content about gender identity, documenting their own transitions, and responding to anti-transgender rhetoric. So these creators use the affordance of the platform, including long-form video, visual storytelling, and direct address, in order to build intimate connections with the viewers and present complex information in accessible formats. TikTok has also recently become a significant platform for transgender content creators. Twitter has served as a key site for transgender policy advocacy with hashtags like #Won'tBeErased. It helped in mobilizing rapid responses to harmful legislation. During the Trump administration in the West, it attempted to remove federal protection for transgender individuals. So these hashtag campaigns, they generated significant media coverage, and they helped in coordinating legal and political resistance. So these digital activism efforts, they exist in a challenging context of increasing anti-transgender legislation and coordinated online harassment. So organizations like Anti-Defamation League have documented systematic campaigns targeting transgender content creators and advocates, so often coordinated these platforms like certain Reddits and other such platforms. In response, the transgender activists, they have developed sophisticated digital safety practices, including private Discord servers, mutual aid networks, and rapid response systems for supporting the community members facing harassment. Now let us talk a little bit about men's right activism and manosphere communities. So digital platforms have also facilitated the growth of anti-feminist and men's rights activism. Okay, then these are some of the communities. So these online spaces, collectively termed as manosphere, they include diverse groups such as men's rights activists, pickup activists, involuntary celibates, and men going their own way. While these communities differ in their specific concerns and tactics, they share a perception that feminism has gone too far and that men face systematic discrimination in contemporary society. So these communities have primarily developed on platforms including Reddit, YouTube, and other specialized forums, and more recently the alternative platforms like Gab and Telegram. Various research, they document how these spaces use digital tools to recruit members, develop shared ideological frameworks, and organize campaigns against feminist initiatives. So these technological architecture of these platforms, they shape community development in specific ways. YouTube's recommendation algorithm has been documented to direct users from relatively moderate content towards increasingly extreme views, facilitating radicalization paths through the manosphere. So these communities represent a form of reactionary activism that explicitly positions itself against feminist gains. Their tactics include coordinated harassment campaigns against feminist figures, strategic use of platform reporting systems to target feminist content, creation and dissemination of anti-feminist memes and talking points. Digital activism has created new possibilities for addressing gender-based violence in conflict zones, where traditional advocacy channels are often compromised. In these contexts, digital tools serve multiple functions: documenting abuses, bypassing state censorship, connecting isolated communities, and mobilizing international pressure. In Syria, women's rights organizations have used encrypted messaging apps and virtual private networks, which are also called VPNs, to document sexual violence by both government forces and armed groups. The Women's Media Center's Women Under Siege project, they created a digital mapping platform where survivors and witnesses could securely report incidents of sexual violence. This digital documentation serves both immediate advocacy purposes and longer-term transitional justice goals by preserving evidence for future accountability. In Myanmar, following the military coup, feminist activists faced dual threats from political repression and gender-based violence. Digital organizing through encrypted platforms enabled continued coordination despite physical restrictions. Women's rights organizations developed digital security training specially designed for women activists, recognizing their particular vulnerability to both surveillance and gender-based online abuse. In Afghanistan, as Taliban control expanded, women's rights networks shifted to digital organizing to maintain connections and continue advocacy work. Platforms like Telegram became crucial for coordinating evacuations, sharing security information, and for maintaining women's movement networks despite severe restrictions on women's public participation. So these few cases, they highlight several key aspects of digital gender activism in high-risk contexts. The critical importance of digital security practices, including encryption, anonymous browsing, and secure deletion protocols. Few of the challenges and limitations of digital gender activism include a fundamental tension in digital activism stems from its reliance on commercial platforms which are basically designed to generate profit rather than to facilitate social change. Major social media companies, they operate through business model that commodifies user data and attention. So these create several specific challenges for gender-based organizing. The platform profit motives often conflict with the activists' needs for safety, privacy, and ethical data practices. The business imperative to maximize user number and time on site, it creates structural resistance to meaningful content moderation and harassment prevention. The commercial platforms, they facilitate what is known as the economy of visibility, in which feminist messages most aligned with consumer culture and individual empowerment receive disproportionate amplification. The dynamic advantages, marketplace feminism that can easily incorporate into brand campaigns while marginalizing more radical critics of economic and social structures. Digital activism thus risks being reduced to its most marketable elements while getting stripped of the transformative potential. Digital activism occurs in contexts of increasing surveillance by both state and corporate actors, creating particular vulnerabilities for gender justice organizers. State surveillance of digital communities or communications has expanded dramatically, with gender and sexuality often being served as explicit targets of monitoring. We can also highlight the language barriers, like the dominance of English on major platforms. It creates participation barriers for non-English speakers. Even when translation tools exist, nuanced political and cultural concepts often lose their meaning in translation, and the costs of creating multilingual content, this fall disproportionately. Many digital platforms have poor accessibility features, creating barriers for activists with visual, hearing, cognitive, or motor disabilities. Common practices like image-based messaging, video without captions, and rapidly moving Twitter conversations can exclude these potential participants. Digital activism often centers younger participants who have greater familiarity with platform features and norms. This can marginalize older activists with valuable organizing experiences and historical knowledge. particularly those women who have been involved in earlier waves of feminist organizing. Effective digital participation often requires resources beyond basic internet access, including smartphones with cameras, sufficient data plans or for video participation, private spaces for recording, and so on. So these requirements can exclude low-income participants, particularly those working multiple jobs or with significant care responsibilities. The most effective gender activism typically combines digital and physical organizing rather than relying exclusively on either of the approach. This hybrid model of both online and offline leverages the complementary strengths of different organizing modalities, digital tools for rapid information sharing and broad mobilization, and in-person connections for building deep relationships and addressing digital divides. I hope whatever we have discussed so far would give you thoughts to discuss more on this particular issue. Thank you, and I will see you in the next video.